developed a certain affinity for a nice, quiet spot in the desert. Honestly, I love it, and I never expected to fall so in love with just having a nice, quiet boondocking spot in the desert. But unfortunately, I did have to leave Arizona and make my way north for a job that I have in Oregon, which at this point is also my new state of residence. But before I got there, I knew that I would have to stop at my old state of residence, and namely my specific region of residence, the Bay Area of California, and take care of some stuff. The journey there involved a lot more snowy region than I would have liked to drive through. Don't get me wrong, it was absolutely gorgeous. It was like driving through a Christmas card, but I did not like dealing with freezing conditions. Eventually, I did make my way to Berkeley, and I hung out for a few days doing a couple of things that I needed to do before I left the area for the rest of the year. And I have now headed my way towards north. But before I get all the way there, I just wanted to check in with you guys, ask one of the most burning questions that I get all of the time, and address some other questions that I just want to answer.
What is up, YouTube? I am resting now that I've finally been into and out of Berkeley. I had to swing around to Berkeley and the surrounding area to kind of wrap up everything I need to wrap up, because I will not be in Berkeley for most of the rest of the year because of a job I am heading to up in Oregon. And I'll talk a little bit more about that once I'm there, once I'm settled in, and all those things. In addition to that, people who've been following the channel for a while know that I am legally a resident of Oregon and have been for a bit now. The truck is currently registered in Oregon, and so I am filtering out all legal ties to being a California resident. Residency is weird when you're a nomad because it may have little to nothing to do with where you actually live. It just may be like your best option for having a legal address, and that is something you're going to need, something that you can legally file as your address with the DMV and your state of residence. And depending on your situation going into van life, that is going to have varying levels of ease to do it or not. There are lots of methods. There are lots of people who do the South Dakota residency and never go to South Dakota. So like my residency has nothing to do with where I will spend most of my time in the future at all. It is literally a legal thing. So that's where I am with that right now. But I still had some things that were still attached to Berkeley that are no longer necessary. And one of those includes my mailing address, which is no longer a mailing address you can use. I do not have a currently shareable mailing address that I'm going to use for the DawnofVanlife at this time. When I do have one, I will let everybody know. But that is completely gone. Bye-bye. I'm no longer paying them for a mailbox. And it was actually sad leaving. I didn't even get that mailbox for the channel. I got it because I needed a mailbox and I wanted a mailbox I was paying for. I did have a residence address I could use through a homeless shelter when I started living out of my car. But there came a point where I felt like if I can pay for something, I should try to transition over to something that I own and something that I am paying for. And so shortly after, or around the time I got my minivan, I was also switching over to a mailbox address that I had purchased and found in Berkeley. And I used that as my primary address for everything until I needed to default back to another one. And even at that point, a friend had set me up with her address in Berkeley and said I could use it, and I was using that. So that's the spiel on sort of this transitional point in my life that I'm at, where I'm headed up to this job. Like I said, I'll talk more about it once I get there, once I'm settled in. But one of the huge things I promised is not building out. One of the huge things I promised was doing a tour of the box truck. And I've always said I am not just going to throw it together to throw it together. I want the setting to be right. I want to feel like it's the right place to shoot it. And one of the big things I wanted out of the way was painting the box truck. Now, I would like to do another coat of paint on the box, but at this time I can't afford that. There will become a time when I can afford it. It is not in the way of me touring the box truck. I am perfectly comfortable with doing it, but I want the right location. In an ideal world, it'll all come together between here and Oregon. In a non-ideal world, I have to go up to Oregon, get settled, and then specifically pick a place where I can take the box truck and shoot the tour. I do not want to just throw it together. I do want to actually spend some time on it. I think at this point I've built it up so much, no matter what I do, people are going to kind of be disappointed with it, or at least they're going to be like, that's it? You waited so long to do that? But even still, I've had a particular idea about how and when I wanted to do this, and so I see no point to compromise that or to throw it together really quickly at this time. And so pretty much it's a question of location and time at this point, because it does take a while to like shoot it as it were. When I shot my Chevy van, I was at a campsite in Utah. I actually remember shooting it, and it was a really cool spot, and I was like, all right, this is the place. Like, I knew I was going to do it at some point. I didn't even go to that spot to shoot the Chevy van, but I was like, this is the spot. And so I set up for it, and I spent most of the day doing the shots for that video, and then put together the video, obviously. And at this point, you have, seen it. It exists, and it still gets views, actually. So yeah, I want to actually feel like this is the right spot, the right time, the right place. As far as actual projects on the box truck, there's nothing I'm waiting to do it. At this time, it's completely a location and time thing. And so because I need to get up to Oregon, it just may make sense to get there first, settle in, pick a spot, shoot the tour. So that's where I am with that at the moment. A lot of people wanted me to sync up with Chrome's guy and have him tour the box truck. Besides the fact I wanted to be the first person to tour the box truck, I also knew he was headed down into Arizona. I was headed out of Arizona. It's not he'll come to you type thing. It's like you kind of got to be in the area where he's shooting type thing. So logistically, I already knew it probably wasn't going to work out. And then as far as my personal goals, I want to be the first one that tours the box truck. After that, if somebody's like, hey, can I tour your box truck? Probably the answer will be yes, but I don't want anybody else to do it before me. I don't care how big or small they are on YouTube. It's my house. I don't want anybody else to do it. And maybe that's selfish, but I don't want anybody else to do it before I do. Okay, so that's the big question I want to answer. But I also had this idea at one point that I was going to do this thing called questions from Patreon, or also questions from YouTube memberships. I just default to Patreon. They're kind of the same thing in two places at this point. And then I realized the way I wanted to do it wasn't going to work. So just to have a fun chatty video to wrap things up, now I've talked about sort of where I'm transitioning, where I'm going, and what's going on with touring the box truck. I thought I would answer the questions they submitted all in one video. Now, some of these questions are about van life or travel. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Some of them are about van life and travel. Some of them are personal questions. I said anything. You could ask anything as long as it wasn't way too far out of left field and would get my YouTube video nicked, basically. So I'm going to cover those Q&A questions right now. So the first question comes from Orletta, and she asks, would you consider a cross-country road trip? And the answer is, I've gone cross-country once. The thing that's in the way of me and a cross-country road trip is the thing that's always in the way of how much I travel, and that's money. This box truck does get 10 miles to the gallon. It's intended as a slow travel vehicle. It is not intended as a quick travel, here one day, elsewhere the next day type vehicle. It was built and designed to be something where I could stay still in it. So number one, if I was going to do a cross-country trip, I would want it to be at the right time of year that I could take my time and not feel rushed. The last time I went across the country, it was to go to my mailbox in Baltimore, not mailbox, storage unit. I had a storage unit in Baltimore that had been sitting there for like 2 years, because when I left the state of Maryland, I thought I was just going to be leaving for a little bit and then coming back. And what happened was I settled down in California and I kind of stayed on the West Coast, but the storage unit just kind of sat there. And so at the beginning of COVID, I was like, okay, I have nothing else going on. I have enough money to get across the country. And the greatest thing about that trip was the trip where I adopted Mickey, which kind of got lost because so much was going on at the time. So I never did like an official, like, look, I have a pet now type thing. So the greatest thing about that cross country, yes, Mickey was born in Maryland, born and then adopted by me and taken back across the country to California. And so as a kitten, he traveled across the country with me. If I do it again, I just want the money and time to take my time with it, to travel at the speed I like. But right now I don't have the money and I definitely don't have the time because I have a job obligation up in Oregon. I'm hoping I can do more travel in 2023, but this year is honestly about banking this job in the best way for my savings account. Interestingly enough, the next question is from Jean, and she says, now that you have some experience under your belt, can you cover the pluses and minuses of pet ownership on the road? Well, the plus, by the way, if you're wondering where Mickey is, he's sleeping in my bed. Just sleeping, his bed that I get to use at night. That's where he is. He just ate not too long ago. So he ate and then he, went to sleep because cats, they sleep a lot. So the pluses and minuses of pet ownership. The pluses are obvious, and I don't care what pet you have, dog, cat, bird, whatever, there is something about having something that is living with you, and the challenges of that are one thing, but the plus is that there is just something about having something living with you, something that responds to you. Yeah, maybe he doesn't actually understand every word I say to him, but he can interpret tone, he can react to it. I used to have a stuffed animal dog, and I used to joke about how that dog didn't have any needs, but also like that stuffed animal dog, his name's Isaac, by the way, and I still have him. But that stuffed animal dog and a couple other stuffed animals I had, they are just decoration. They're just toys. They're something to cuddle with at night, but they're not going to respond to you. They're not going to do weird, quirky things when you don't expect it. They're not this living thing that you get to experience life with. There's just something about the companionship of something that is alive, and that is wonderful. And there's no replacing that. The negatives, sort of the minuses, is one, because you're adding something living, you are adding the expense of something living. That I can't just think about my food now. I have to think about Mickey having food. I just can't think about my comfort now. I have to think about Mickey's comfort. So like, before, if it was too hot or too cold, my biggest solution, if it just felt like too much to be inside of the van, was to leave the van. To go indoors, to go walk around a store for a while, to go to a shopping mall, to go somewhere else. Well, now I have to think about if Mickey can come with me to that somewhere else, if that is the only solution I can come up with, or invest in the money to have it be comfortable for him. So there are expenses associated with having an animal with you that you wouldn't have otherwise. Also, depending on what kind of animal you have, I get away with a lot because Mickey's a cat, but especially if you have a dog, there are places that do not admit dogs. And I love when the sign says dogs, because I go, technically I don't have a dog. Sometimes it says pet, sometimes it says dog, but you have to worry about that. And if you do decide to let your animal outside, Mickey did go outside a couple of times. While he's not really an outdoor indoor cat, like, he doesn't care. It's not like he's asking to go outside all the time. He mostly doesn't care. There are times I've opened the door and he noticed a person was standing by the door and he wants to say hi, but that's about the end of his interest. So he has a mixed interest in going outside. But when he does, I do have to think about, is there anything out there that can get him? So like during RTR and Schoolie Palooza, there were a lot of dogs, and sometimes we just saw dogs walking around and didn't even know who they belonged to. Like, we had no idea where their owners were, where they came from, or anything like that. And so once you have an animal, there's a risk with the other animals around. You don't know, how other people are disciplining their animals, how well behaved or not they are. Like, you have no idea what this animal's background is. If they show up with their owner, at least, and they seem to be responding to their owner, you can get a read. But when there's just some stray dog walking around, like, you don't know. And rather you have a dog or a cat or something else, if you are taking that animal outside to adventure with you, like, there is inherent risk in that. And then not only are you hurt if your animal gets hurt, like emotionally hurt and sad and upset if your animal gets hurt, now you also have to deal with that animal's vet bills. So that's another way that that animal's gonna need the vet, rather they get hurt or not. Like, vet bills are gonna be a part of your life. Feeding the animal is gonna be a part of your life. And where you can and can't go, and when you can and can't leave them alone, is gonna affect how you behave every day in your travel van life, nomad journey, whatever that is. I would not trade having Mickey now for anything, but I am very happy that I did not have him in the early stages of my van life, when there would have been way too many complications to having a pet. Just make sure you're ready for sort of the obligations that having an animal on the road with you brings. Whew. So Kelly has a question related to stage management. For those of you who don't know, I am a theatrical stage manager. That's been the primary on and off job that I've done over the past few years contractually. I've done some other odd jobs in theater, and I've done some other odd jobs in general. What I figured out after all this time is I honestly don't want to work in theater unless I'm working a show. When I have done like office work in theater, it has been completely and entirely boring. It's just an office job at that point. It doesn't matter that it's in the arts, at least for me personally. So I've sort of decided, if stage management is not going to work out ultimately, I'd rather not work in theater than do something besides be in the stage management field. Now, for the stage management field, that could mean stage managing directly as the lead stage manager, being an assistant stage manager. Some shows have what is called a production stage manager and a stage manager. Sometimes those terms are interchangeable depending on the organization of the theater. And then there's the ASM position and the PA position, which is production assistant. The production assistant sometimes has almost the same duties as the assistant stage manager. Sometimes it's just you're just slightly under the ASM. It can fall out a lot of ways. And then there's crew, and crew members are just like your little hands on the show. Now, for small theater, which is what I do a lot, and I'm giving all this background before I answer Kelly's question, sorry, my brain blacked out. For smaller theater, a lot of times, sometimes you only have a stage manager. You have no crew, you have no assistant, and the stage manager is the PSM. They're the production stage manager. As shows get larger and have more budgets, and especially on Broadway, a lot of times you'll have all of those roles filled. So yeah, and so Kelly basically asked me, can you tell us about your favorite experience in stage management or the theater? Oh, this is actually a hard question. I in my brain, I'm like going through my head, and like, it's so hard. I would have to say it's a really silly one. So I worked with this children's theater in Berkeley, they're Berkeley Children's Theater, so it's not that difficult to figure out. But they have shows where adults are actors, but the content of the shows are aimed at kids. And then they also have like a little program that's basically an acting training program where kids go, they learn a play, they star in the play, and then people come see the play. So it's like a school play, but not at school. And one of my favorite experiences working with this program, now as a stage manager with this program, the teacher basically manages the kids. You don't really do all the duties that are normal to a stage manager. You're there to call the show, which means you're going to sit at the board, you're going to hit the buttons, you're going to make sure lights and sound happen at the proper time. And that's your only assignment. You're given days to show up for the show. They've learned the show, you know, in their class that took place over a certain amount of time. And then the show is put up. And what I loved was sound checks with the kids. So in a normal sound check, and adult actors know this, you just keep talking until the sound person tells you your mic is good. You don't stop talking. You know, you can say lines from the play. If you're singing, they might ask you to sing so they can make sure your singing voice is also balanced. And your sound tech is going to say, cool, you're good, bye-bye. But it's, you know, you're waiting on the cue from the sound tech. And the kids didn't know, like, they're still learning how to operate. And so the kids would be told by their teacher, just say a line from the play. But a lot of these kids had like really short burst lines, because of course, like, they're kids, so they're learning very simple plays. And so they say their line and they'd stop. But the sound tech wasn't done like checking their mic, so it'd be like, keep going, or like, can you say the alphabet, or anything to encourage them to keep talking. But I just remember they would be so proud that they remembered and said their line during the sound check. And I thought it was the most adorable thing ever. There was a time I wanted kids, and now I feel like I'm getting too old. Like, I wouldn't want to be somebody's mother this late in life, because I'd be worried about how old I would be by the time they graduated school. But I definitely love kids. Wanted kids for sure when I was younger. I just feel like I'm past the point where it's ever going to happen, but I always found that completely adorable. All right, the next question, she says, I'm a horror nerd. I want to know if you like horror movies, and if so, what's your favorite one or franchise? If you don't like horror movies, what's your favorite movie and why? So I'm going to find the answer to this question really, really funny. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. I'm not a horror nerd at all. I really am not a huge fan of horror movies. Now, I can watch a thriller if it's like more a thriller and less a slasher. I am not into slasher movies or high levels of gore, even if it's done really intelligently. Like, there are movies where I'm like, I can respect this as a film, but I don't like it. This is not something I'm gonna watch for fun. So there's that. But the funny thing is, my answer to your favorite movie question is Nightmare Before Christmas. And you're like, what? You just said you don't like horror films. But I don't think of Nightmare Before Christmas, besides the fact it's obviously created as a Halloween/Christmas movie for children. I do like the idea of magical alternate worlds. This one just it happens to be set in a Halloween setting. And so they're really making fun of the horror genre in a way in creating this world, or having a nice little jokey go at it. Because obviously you have the Pumpkin King, who's like a living skeleton, and his girlfriend is like this animated like rag doll, and you have these creepy little kids who want to like kill Santa Claus. And so like there's a lot of elements of it that play into horror, but it's very much not horror. And I more enjoy the aesthetics of early Tim Burton. And I like stop motion animation. I think stop motion animation is like the coolest thing. And to me, this is a movie about a midlife crisis. You know, you have this Pumpkin King who's like the king of Halloween, and he's just gotten bored with his job, and he's looking for something to excite his life. And like, he hears about Christmas, and it's like, whoa, this job sounds cool, and Santa will actually thank me when I take over for him. Of course, he's clueless about how to do things for kids because his whole context is Halloween. So it's like, I love that movie. Like, I love sort of the contrast of the actual story to sort of the visuals. And early Tim Burton was just brilliant. All right, our final question is from Sarah, and what she asks is, what album, group, band, or musical did you listen to most over the past year? And that's easy. Hamilton. Hamilton is, you know, just a musical I can turn on anytime and just listen through it straight through on loop and get to the beginning and start it over again. There are people who have asked, but up there on the wall, if you can see it, I've moved it a couple of times. Well, that's Mom over there between, this is too hard, the shelf and the shelf is Lin-Manuel Miranda. Lin-Manuel, among other things, including In the Heights, is the writer of both the book and the music, I think, for Hamilton. And he was also originally Alexander Hamilton in the original run of the Hamilton musical. And I remember for the longest time, it just sounded dumb to me. People were talking about the show Hamilton and, like, you know, that it was like history with rap as a musical. And I was like, that sounds dumb. Because you know how, like, when, I don't know, maybe I think, like, in the 80s or whatever, like, they used to do a little thing where they tried to do, like, these rap songs that taught you stuff, but all of them were corny. And so my roommate at the time, back when I was living back in the DC area, the Baltimore, DC, Maryland area back then, she got the musical and she started playing it. And I think it was like her girlfriend who introduced her to the musical, her now wife. And so it was the first time I heard it. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. Like it had all the beats and rhythms of a musical. And the way they were using hip hop, it wasn't corny. It was very good, very well thought out, very specifically structured. And honestly, Hamilton is more of an opera to me than a musical. And the only line is usually operas aren't in English. But the thing about an opera is the whole story actually is sung, whereas in a lot of musicals, there are spoken word parts in addition to the musical bits. So yeah. So that's all the questions I have from Patreon. I might do another questions from Patreon next month. On Patreon, we're doing a couple of things now. I've been posting daily on Patreon, just little things about what's going on for my life, unless I have something else major going on. I Zoom with patrons twice a month now and going forward. And I think I'm going to start doing questions from Patreon moving forward, just as a fun little thing. And I know some people are going to be upset that it's questions from Patreon, and maybe I'll do a more open Q&A as well at some point. But it's also a way of controlling things for me and filtering them down to a smaller space so I don't feel overwhelmed about attacking them. When I do see questions I really think need to be answered in the comments, I do try to answer those. But also I like the idea that I can answer some questions that aren't necessarily van life and more just about me and my life and who I am. I think I would love to do a responding to your assumptions about me video. Like, I think that would be a fun thing to do. So maybe I'll do that as an open-ended thing for everybody. We'll see. I do want to do more laid-back videos like this where I don't feel stressed about sort of what I have to produce as content. Because a lot of times it's like I want it to be worth it when I post stuff on YouTube, and sometimes that gives me a sort of paralyzed state about posting. And that's just what it is. That's all me. That's all me, dude. But even as I start this job, I know I'm going to have a lot of hours dedicated to the job, and I don't want the channel to completely die out while I'm doing that. And so it's going to be a learning how to balance sort of my obligations to my job and my obligations to this job, because they're both jobs, and finding a nice balance between the two. And that includes time I just have to dedicate to sit down editing, compiling clips, and all of the stuff that's involved in actually taking stuff I shot and turning it into a video. This one is very much intended as I'm gonna sit here and talk to you video. And that's all there is, I think. I will see you guys next time.
Thank you for joining me for this very simple, very silly video. I am so grateful to everyone who takes time to view my videos and interact with my videos, and I appreciate all of you. Just a reminder that watching videos, liking videos, subscribing to the channel, all of this stuff is extremely, extremely, extremely important. And as important as anything else as far as me staying relevant on YouTube, I do have to appease this thing called the YouTube algorithm. So just watching videos and definitely watching through ads if they're not too long and annoying absolutely helps out the channel. As always, I'd like to extend that special thanks to my supporters on Patreon and YouTube memberships. You guys are great, and I look forward to talking with you all soon. That's everybody, not just Patreon and YouTube memberships. I look forward to talking to all of you, either through the comment section or on Patreon or whatever. I just can't save myself here. Bye bye.